Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a great afternoon at TU Wien and all the best for 2024. It's not often that we have this very esteemed audience when we have an even more esteemed presenter. You know, the reason why Professor Dieter Kranzlmüller is visiting us today in Vienna is simply sustainability. And as a dean of the Faculty of Informatics, I am really convinced that we as computer scientists have to do even more in this area. On the one hand, we have to provide solutions to make the world more sustainable, climate change and so on. And we have to provide better algorithms, better tools, so that we are not only the solution providers, so that we are not only the solution providers, but also that we are not the problem makers, in the sense that we use more and more energy. Huh? You know, there are this famous AI for good, for bad, or no, it's complex. So within having this motivation, we managed to establish lecture among all computer science departments in Austria every Monday, 5 to 6 p.m. All lectures are online because they are, you know, from 8 different locations in Austria. And since it's about sustainability, we shouldn't travel too much, except there is one hybrid lecture. And this is exactly now. I'm very pleased and very honored to have Dieter Kranzlmüller here. We know each other for 31 years, since we have been together at Johannes Kepler University in Linz. I went east, he went west, and you know most of him. Dieter Kranzlmüller is a professor for high performance computing. He is the director he's the chair of the board of directors of the Leibniz Computing Centre, Munich Leibniz Computing Centre of the Bavarian Academy of Sciences and Humanities. He is very much interested in the interplay of high performance computing, AI, and quantum computing. AI was that in the middle. I have read it again. And I really like how it's explained in Wikipedia that he stands for infrastructure for science. And this is, I think, what we all need today, that we need better, more sustainable infrastructures to make an even better science. So I'm very pleased that you are here, and it's your floor, Professor Kranzlmüller.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year for me as well. It's a real pleasure to be here, and there's one more reason to come to Vienna, because I love the town, coming as a tourist, not as a staff member of a university here. And also, I admit I was just getting some Sachertorte to bring home, to export some good, valuable things to Germany. Now, talking about this today, I think it's a very good idea to have such a lecture series. And when you sent your email, I think it took me 5 minutes to reply, yes, I'll be happy to come. Of course, the work I'm doing here is not my own work alone, but there's a number of people which have been contributing here. And most of these people are actually PhD students who did their PhD in computer science and actually came out of what we're doing as a program. Now, why is sustainability an issue for computer science? You just said it. I think until 2 years ago, most of us always thought, well, electricity comes from the power plug, and who cares about where it comes from? So my goal today is to talk a bit more about this electricity. And 2 years ago, we had the attack of Russia on the Ukraine, and that changed some thinking. And I want to go into this direction with you. So let's start with something which is not science, but is kind of taken from some Google research on the web. How much electrical power do we need actually for digital transformation? And we often think about this, as I said, it comes from the power plug, who cares? So let's take a very simple example. Everybody has that, and well, probably you have a newer phone. I have an iPhone 8 because I'm very conservative in changing to a new system. And I checked what the iPhone 8 is taking as battery capacity. I'm also checking how much it takes per charge, which is 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And that means with one charge per day, I need about 0.0027 euros per day and less than €1 per year to charge my mobile phone every day. So I think even with a university salary, I can afford that, yeah? So that's an easy thing, mobile phone, very much, we know it, yeah? Next thing is a personal computer. We just take one of today's Intel or AMD processors, multi-core, some dedicated GPU in it, and we say, okay, we are using it for 4 hours a day. Well, that means 200 kilowatt hours per year, and that means about 60 euros per year, what we spend on electricity costs for the personal computer. Actually, there's another statistics. If you take the personal computer and let it running 24 hours a day throughout the entire year, your CO2, your carbon footprint is equal to driving an SUV. So either you take the SUV or the personal computer, just to give you a little bit of an insight. And when we talk about cars, I assume many people, I don't own a car, so this is something foreign to me. If you just want to have a car today, many people buy Teslas, and of course you can also see what does the Tesla take, and apparently this Model 60 takes about €5.43 per 100 kilometers, and it takes about 814 euros electricity costs per year, which is also still acceptable if I compare it to what you pay with fuel and petrol, taking the average mileage. Now, all this pricing was done before the Russian attack. So with the Russian attack, prices went up, and you can more or less multiply by 2, 1.5 by 2, depending on what time you're taking it. Now, why is this interesting for us? And why is this interesting for a computing center? The Leibniz Supercomputing Centre is actually an IT service provider. So same as you have here, there's a computing center that provides services. We do this since 1962, so it's pretty old institution, so to say, and we do this for the Munich universities. And then there's already the first point, which of the Munich universities, and that is the reason that it came into existence. Because 61 years ago, there was the question, do we give it to the TU or do we give it to the LMU? And there was the Solomonic decision. They said, well, let's give it to the Academy of Sciences and serve both universities equally. And that is something that makes my personal life sometimes a bit difficult, because if you give something on one hand, you also have to give the same thing on the other hand, and this will be very much compared. But on the other hand, I'm also happy because I'm the only computing center in Germany that has 2 universities of excellence. And these demands from the university really drive what we are doing. So we're providing these services, and both universities get some basic support, like access points, like the networking, like some standard storage part on all the services. Then we also do some services for all of Bavaria, which means that the center is funded mostly by Bavaria, so we have to give something back. And that includes, for instance, our online cloud storage. Every Bavarian scientist has a free online cloud storage with us, and that data does not leave Bavaria. I think at the moment, everybody has 100 terabytes or something, and it's used actually by 170,000 people in Bavaria. So it's a good kind of service that we can use it for. With respect to Germany, we are one of the 3 national HPC centers. And the role here is not just to be another HPC center, but our real role is to make sure that we provide capabilities that extend to anything that is available in Germany. So we go beyond what the universities usually have, and if you have more demand than your own university can fulfill, anybody, any scientist from Germany can apply. And some share of that also goes to European scientists. And these last two roles we share with our two partner institutes, which is one Jülich and the other one in Stuttgart. So we always also try that one of these three centers has always the most powerful system in Germany, so to say. Now, I've said we're providing IT services. Well, truth is, that's what we did for many, many, many years. But these days, we're doing much more. We help the scientists to make sure that their particular demand is fulfilled by an e-infrastructure. So we are building e-infrastructures for the demands of scientists. And we have just been talking about one project, DLR, the Terabyte project. And the goal here was really to make sure, could we provide all the data from the DLR Earth observation satellites at a central point, not only for storing them, but also for analyzing them. So there's dedicated GPU resources, dedicated computer resources, which help you use this infrastructure. And we did that as a joint project by developing the infrastructure exactly to the needs, what the scientists have there and what DLR in this particular case has. So we see ourselves as a partner for digital transformation of science and research. And there's one additional point. We're not only a service provider and not only this partner, but we are an institute of the Bavarian Academy of Sciences and Humanities. So we also have a research task. So we have a research activities which have to be done as a member of the academy. And in concrete, that means about 1/3 of the people we have is paid from research projects. And we have to really kind of provide some of the research back to what we are doing. The tricky thing here is that our research should not be in competition with our partner universities, because otherwise we get trouble there. So what we are doing is more or less, we take what the universities develop and we operate it, and we make sure that others can also use it. Take, for example, a quantum computer. The quantum computers today, once they're pushed out of the experimental physics labs, well, they're not really useful for the average scientist. So we need to take them and we need to develop the software, the operating system, the processes for managing this system. And that's what our research at the Leibniz Supercomputing Centre is. Now you see the center here with the 5 buildings. So there's the entrance here. We have 1 institute building, 2 institute buildings. We have at the moment 304. I come back to the 300,000 later. 304 employees from 46 nations, which is one of the things I'm proud of, because we are very diverse, so to say. And we really kind of have people from all around the world. We have a small cube here. This is the visualization center. We have our own lecture room building. And this is the twin cube where we have all the infrastructure. So this is where the computers are running. And in total, we have about 10,000 square meters of area, and about 1/3 is only used for the computers because we need 2/3 to run it. So I said we're doing research. So this is also our experimental field. So while we are running the services, we are really also researching on how to improve the running of the services. I'll show you more details later in the talk. One of the interesting things is these white boxes that you see on the roof here. So 7 of these white boxes. And that gets us back to the electricity issue. One of these boxes cools 2.2 megawatt. So 2.2 megawatt times 7 is almost 10. So we have at the moment, we can use up to 10 megawatts of electricity. And we're using about 6 megawatts at the moment, which comes up to a power bill of about 1,500 to 2,000 euros per hour. So just to give you an idea, I will say 1 to 2 days is about the annual salary of 1 member of staff. And in a year, we need about 120 staff salaries just to run these systems. So electricity for us is not from the power plug, but it's kind of an expensive power plug we have there. Question is, of course, what are we doing with all this electricity if just electricity cost goes into millions? Well, here's one example. This is actually the world's largest turbulence simulation. It is a simulation in the area of astrophysics, and it shows how stars were born close or shortly after the Big Bang. So we had only these gases out there, and the question is, how do you get something like a sun out of these gases? And with this turbulence simulation, we could show for the first time how these gases work. Now, for computer scientists, the resolution here is a cube with a side length of 10,080 elements in 3 dimensions. And that's the world's largest simulation. We are doing this on our supercomputer. There is no larger simulation because that's using all the capacity the supercomputer has. And there's no other supercomputer that was able at that point in time to do more. Now, spending here the electricity costs on this application is several thousand euros, as you can imagine. Uses all the system for a couple of hours. So one run, several thousand euros just in electricity. Question is, what does it help us? How do you as a user benefit from that? Well, maybe not directly. It's maybe nice to tell your girlfriend or your boyfriend in the evening, see, I know how these stars get together, but there's no immediate point on you. Let me show you another simulation, this one here. And this is also an example that we have been computing. This is actually the circle of Willis, which is the arterial tree in the human head in powering your brain, more or less. What we see here is the blood flow. And the simulations here for the blood flow is the same turbulence simulation which we have just seen there. And even this small example for this very small area takes several thousands of CPUs to compute this little video that we are seeing here. So the idea really is that we can use these things for personalized medicine. Okay, again, we're talking about one example here. I want to go to one more that gets us back more into this electricity and what we are doing in terms of harm to the planet. So simulating one human's brain, and if it's personalized medicine, we have to help this patient. That's all fine. Let's go to something which has an effect on the bigger population, so to say. What you see here on the left is the simulation. What you see on the right is the observation of flooding in an area called Deggendorf, which is a little bit north of Munich, which was heavily flooded, and that used to be the Autobahn. Yeah? So there was no traffic there, and we put this picture in actually because the truck driver in the first truck there is a good friend of our former science minister. So it was a good picture to show and make them aware. The left one shows a simulation from the project called Climax, where colleagues under the leadership of Ralf Ludwig from LMU Munich have been trying to simulate the effects of climate change on our region, on what does it mean for Bavaria. And we were not only simulating what it means into the future, we were also comparing it with the last flooding that has been observed. So there was a famous flooding in 1999, and you could see the flooding from 1999, and you can see the predictions of future floodings in that area. So you can stand there in VR and you can check out what does this mean for Munich. I can only tell you the results are devastating because the former floodings are all small compared to what the predictions give us for the future. Now, the project is interesting in many aspects because it shows that climate not only has a worldwide, and that's one of the problems I think we have. We're always thinking about climate global and what does it mean, global increase of 1.5 degrees. The project really takes this down to an area like Bavaria and says, what does this global change mean in terms of extreme events for Bavaria? So we are scaling down and we need the supercomputer to run this. This application alone has been taking 120 million core hours. So it was running for a number of months on the project, on the supercomputer, and it has used a number of euros to do that. And the project kind of results in that we see changes in the frequency and intensity of this HQ 100. This is the 100-year high floodings. And you see that we have here some points which are getting red. So red means this floodings that occurred usually every 100 years are likely to occur between 20 and 40 years. So the frequency is increased, but also the intensity is increased. And that is a result from what we see with the climate prediction on a small region on what that means. So there is an effect of doing that. And of course, we have been using lots of electricity and produced lots of carbon to find this one out. Yeah? So there is this conflict of should we do it or should we not do it? Of course, this one, and here's the scientific result in a sense, this one was directly inserted in the last climate report, in the IPCC report in 2021 and 2022. There's 2 chapters which have used the results of our simulation and put that in. So we're pretty much aware of what it means to run these systems, but also at the same time to be contributing to the problem we have there. So it was for us always important to think about what does this really mean? Now the system I've been talking about is this one here. That's called SuperMUC NG. NG stands for next generation. That's about 86 cabinets, and in principle it's more or less identical to the architecture that VSC has. Yeah. So it's not much of a difference here. The system has, and here are the 300,000, the system has 311,040 cores. These are pure x86 cores, and it has been used for 9.6 billion core hours, has been doing 2.4 million jobs, 515 projects for 1,400 scientists. So not every scientist is using it, but there are scientists who need this tool for their daily work in a sense. There's also some other factors here like peak performance, lint-pack performance, not the scope of today. I mean, one thing is maybe interesting. When we got the system, it was number 8 on the top 500 list. And the top 500 list ranks the most powerful computers on the world. And I couldn't care less. Yeah? This is like Formula 1 race. It's nice on Sunday evening, but this is not what we want to do. And I already say, when a politician asks me, how fast are we? Where are we on the top 500? I said, I don't want the fastest system. I want the best system for science. And that's the goal that we are having. Now, the problem with these top 10 systems is, on the next slide, the power consumption. At this point in time, we really can only get more power out of this system if we put more electricity in. There is an increase in all the top 500 systems. So all the supercomputers need more power. And I'm sure VSC also has some kind of restrictions on the power that it can provide here. But if you see the top 50 has a slight increase, and then the top 10, the increase is really substantial. If we talk about the largest systems on the planet, the increase in electricity usage is really an issue here. So we've been noticing this, and here comes the research part. So we have also been discussing what can we do as computer scientists to improve that. And we've tried some things. Now, one is, of course, when we buy systems, we force the vendors with the money we have to make some new things, to try some new ways. SuperMUC NG is a budget of 100 million euros. So we took this 100 million euros and said, you get it only if you do this or that on the system. And in fact, what we are doing is we give them the 100 million and we say, you have to give us the most powerful system and the cost for the electricity within this 100 million. So the incentive for them is being the best in terms of performance, but also being the best in terms of electricity consumption. So in 2012, we installed the first hot water cooled system. And at that time, we were only cooling CPU and memory, and that's now 11 years ago. And to tell the truth, when we discussed it and IBM was winning the contract, the CEO of IBM, Ginny Rometty at that time, was in a room and she said, oh, nobody needs hot water cooled systems. Why would you use hot water cooled system? The US centers have all the chillers out there and it doesn't matter. Nobody needs hot water cooled system. Why we are using hot water for cooling the system? Well, the idea is simple. When you go in there with some water cooling and you get out hotter water, you need to get back to the original temperature. And this is kind of requires some energy the lower you get with the inlet temperature. So our hot water cooled system, and that was SuperMUC in 2012, was working with 35 degrees Celsius water. We go in with 35 degrees Celsius, we come out with, I don't know, 50 degrees Celsius. The question is, how much energy do we need to get back to the 35 degrees Celsius? Well, today, if you look outside, all we need to do is wait long enough. And then we are below 35 degrees Celsius. Actually, and that's the 2018 system, we went up to 45 degrees Celsius. And this system can be cooled with the outside temperatures throughout the year without any fridge or any cooling addition. Yeah. So we really just use inlet temperatures up to 45 degrees Celsius. We transport it to the roof. We wait long enough and the water is cold enough again to cool the system. And that allows us something which is called here simple the PUE, the power usage effectiveness. This is a metric to tell you how much energy do you need for the system to run and to cool. And what is the relation of the cooling in part compared to the running. So 100% is what you need for running the system, and above 100 is what you need for cooling. So SuperMUC NG has a POE of 1.03, means we need only 3% extra to cool the system, which is using 100% of the electricity before. That's the effect of hot water cooling. And this 3% is actually just the pumps that get the water to the roof and back down into the system. Okay, there's more things coming. We are now working on ExaMUC, which is the next one to come. But that's not what I wanted to go, because the important aspect here is the computer science point. Because when we think about this data center as an experimental field, we can also see different areas where sustainability or energy efficiency comes in here. And so we have not only the HPC system hardware, we not only have the HPC system software, we can also work on the applications being more energy efficient. An optimized application will require less electricity than a non-optimized version of the same code. There's also an idea of improving the building infrastructure. What can we do in terms of the building? And while from the outside it still looks the same as it was constructed in 2006, from the inside the building has massively changed because we are optimizing the system on the floor. So the computing center is more or less running the services, and while it's running the services, we are trying to optimize what we are doing. So I think here comes the point for computer scientists, because if we talk about this, we need a holistic approach to all of that across all these domains. So there's, in my opinion, not many CS domains which do not fit in here. One example, for instance, IoT. How does IoT fit in here? In order to optimize, we need to have the data. We need to have sensors, and we need to understand what these sensors are doing. So the TwinCube is full with sensors that give us detail about how much electricity we need, how much heat we are generating. So this goes on, and there is more kind of computer science research here. One of the things we also thought about, do we always need to run the supercomputer full speed? Well, if you take my laptop, for instance, he's now completely bored because he only has to do this PowerPoint. So he's not running full speed with the CPU. He's clocking down. And we did some measurements, and we tried to see what is a good clock frequency for the system. And we are running SuperMUC NG on average with 68% of the nominal frequency. And that's optimal for the codes. Why is that the reason? Because in any code, when you're fetching the memory, fetching the data needs more time, and in the meantime, the processor is bored. Nothing to do here, just wait. So if we could have the processor running slower, then the time where the processor is waiting is smaller for the same fetch. The interesting thing is running it with less frequency means we are also requiring less electricity, because that's what our laptop is doing. So it's the same technology on the supercomputer, and I think there's only a handful of HPC centers who are doing this at the moment. There's other things like power capping, sleep modes. I think we can imagine what that is. We're also using 100% renewable energies, and I hear from many computing centers, no, this will not work for us because there is some fluctuation in there depending on the sun and the wind. We've shown that this works. Other things we did is, well, this is more kind of hands-on. We removed the glycol from the cooling. And the question is, what do you need glycol for? We know we need it in order to make sure that in winter it doesn't freeze. So in this sense, we removed the glycol because we said we have hot water. And as long as the water is running, it cannot freeze. So the invention here was really kind of an emergency shutdown of the cooling cycles outside so that they are not freezing once the water stops. And this really helps us also because glycol-free water is much better cooling than water with glycol in there. So these are the small things that come together. And again, you only know this because you're measuring it. You have to measure all these things. Waste heat is another thing that we just discussed. Of course, we're producing this hot water. Could we use it for anything? Well, we're getting the water comes out with 68 degrees Celsius. This is a little bit of a problem. For beer brewing, you need 75 degrees Celsius. Yeah. But we're working on other things. So our center, our building is 100% heated by the warm water that the supercomputer is producing. The problem is, for heating our own buildings, our own 5 buildings, we need 0.5% of the heat generated. So we could heat 200 of these buildings, more or less. There's another issue that until Mr. Putin went to Ukraine, it was cheaper to buy Russian gas than to use the waste heat. So this has changed. Since 2 years, we are discussing now how to use the waste heat in the bigger area of parking and to do that. So there's a political question here as well. And then there is inventions like adsorption cooling machines. The question of like, could we produce cold water out of the hot water? I have some examples for that one. So, and final question is, of course, future computing technologies. So quantum is also not only interesting as a programming approach, but also as kind of a way to reduce the electricity. If the quantum computer can produce results quicker and quantum computer requires less electricity, then we can again be more powerful on that aspect. So putting this all together shows this is our energy efficiency research at LHZ, and it has a number of different aspects here. And I think I mentioned most of these things like hot water cooling, heat reusage, energy-aware scheduling. So the scheduler Slurm has an extension that more or less decides on what to do with the code and how to run it energy efficiently. But there's also lots of instrumentation here, and there is even a database here, the data center database, which includes all these data. So we can do some analysis afterwards and see what could we do next. So for HPC, we are mostly on the safe side. Now, HPC is sometimes seen as something that is here now for 30 years or longer. What about AI? And again, let me start with something that you can easily research on the web. What about ChatGPT? Every talk has ChatGPT in there, so I needed to have one, yeah? Question is ChatGPT energy efficient? And you can ask ChatGPT for that. And ChatGPT says, well, that depends on factors like hardware, model size, deployment. Large models can be energy intensive. Oh, at least it knows, good. And of course, there's a question how to implement and how the infrastructure is being done. So there is awareness in the model itself. That's good to know. Can we also find out what is the energy consumption of ChatGPT? Well, the answer here is a little bit less concrete. It says for the GPT-3 model with 175 billion parameters, we get about hundreds of megawatt hours of electricity. Well, which is a very kind of abstract number. What can you do with it? Yeah. So let's try to make some comparison to get this into picture. Okay. ChatGPT energy consumption to train the GPT-3 model, 1,064 megawatt hours. And to operate search requests, 260 megawatt hours per day, just for this one model. And compare this to the world's fastest supercomputer, which is Frontier at the moment at Oak Ridge National Laboratory with 1.6 exaflops. Well, that has only 22.7 megawatts electricity consumption on a day, and it needs about 545 megawatt hours per day for all these simulations it's doing. So ChatGPT is in a similar region as the world's fastest machine just for training this model. Okay, we say training we do once, maybe a couple of times, but not all the. So let's put some money aside to do that. What about the ChatGPT query? Every time you put a prompt into ChatGPT, well, that's 6.79 watt hours. Yeah? Compare that again to your mobile phone. This number is not neglectable. But let's compare it to something that everybody of us knows and that I've been using here, a Google query. The same question that you put in as a prompt on one side, on the other side is 0.3 watt hours in Google. So you need 20 times more electricity for getting a result from this new tool. I think there's some optimization potential in here. In fact, if we put this all together, also here's some number, the 260 megawatt hours per day correspond to the consumption of a small town with 24,000 households or 64,000 inhabitants. We are just spending on electricity on GPT, on search requests. Yeah? So this is, I think, the number that is really interesting here. Also, the average per capita consumption, 1.5 megawatts per year, yeah, compared to this 1,000 that you have for training the model. So there is some aspect here. In fact, if we go again back to the top 500 supercomputers and we take the list from last year, we just check where is NVIDIA in these boxes. Yeah? So when do NVIDIA, and there is top 5 out of 16 entries, 16 entries in the top 500 are more or less optimized AI nodes, which are also used for HPC. And if we take a look at these entries, they go up to position number 9, 14, and so on. And the interesting thing here is that they all use standard NVIDIA technology, which is what you can just buy. This is one of these DGX boxes. You can more or less order it. We were just discussing last year, December was a good price. This year is already more expensive. In fact, I think my reasoning was these boxes were cost about 300,000 euros before OpenAI. Now they're costing 400,000 euros. This year is probably already 450,000. It's the same box, yeah? It's just kind of marketplace in here. Now they have been using these boxes to build these kind of supercomputers, and they can, of course, run these GPT and AI models, yeah? What's the problem with these boxes? The problem is these boxes are air-cooled. So all the top 500 systems with NVIDIA are air-cooled. Water cooling is only a supplement, yeah? So it's only an add-on that the vendor, Supermicro, can do this as one possibility. They give you rear door heat exchangers of something, but it's still water-cooled. The PUE here is 1.65 to 1.8. So that means 65% to 80% extra on cooling. For any AI operation you do, you need almost the same electricity to cool that because it's air-cooled. I think that's the real difficult thing here. Yeah? Now, NVIDIA doesn't have an incentive to do that because they are selling these machines. Yeah? But in practice, what you have here is you need 30% just on the air-cooled fans, and you need 30% on the cooling infrastructure. So additional, that's on top of what you need for just running these systems. And that's the interesting question here because we came in here. And this had to be measured. So this is something you don't get this data. You need to measure what it is like. Yeah. In fact, if you take a look at these things, these are these boxes, the DGX, and this is what we bought. So we bought this for the Munich Center for Machine Learning. And you see 3 boxes in here, 2 in here. Now, these 2 to 3 NVIDIA DGX A100 means there's 16 to 24 GPUs per rack. This is air-cooled. Well, the rack is, in fact, water-cooled. There's water here, exchanger here, but up here it's air-cooled, more or less. And they have this PUE, as I was mentioning before. Well, I mentioned the power usage effectiveness before. Now, the problem here is, with the air cooling, we cannot put more of these boxes in here. So these racks are really left empty because there's no more cooling capacity in here. These AI boxes just require massive amounts of air, and you cannot put in more. So more or less with 24 per rack, we are fully done. There's nothing you can do additionally. And we said this is unacceptable. So let's go back to the water. And the interesting, in the interest of time, I'll skip over here a little bit. What we see here, we compare air to water cooling, and we see there's lots of potential in here using water as a cooling mechanism. Yeah? And of course, everybody's afraid, oh, water, electricity doesn't work together nicely. Well, in 11 years, we had 2 small leakages, and they were all on the connectors. Yeah? And they were all kind of just because water takes some time to get out of the connectors. But there's nothing else we ever had problems with water there. So for us, we can only say it works. And this is how it looks like. So this is the room with just the water connectors. So wherever there's this water pipe on the floor, you get a rack more or less on top. And the water is inside the system. So we see the water actually flowing as close as possible to the chips. And of course, you need extra kind of pipes on the outside of the racks. Yeah, you also need kind of extra water processing plants. Yeah, but the advantage here is we do the infrastructure usually once every 15 to 20 years, while we do the computers every 5 years. So if you do this in a good way, you can really reuse it for some of these systems. Now, one of the racks contains 3,000 liters of water per hour. So there's quite some water flowing through there in order to cool this. But if we put all the factors together, and this is what I've been telling you, you have the percentages here. The result is that we are saving 2 million euros per year on electricity cost with this kind of cooling. And 2 million per year was the incentive to do this, because over the runtime of the system, 5 to 6 years, is 12 million euros we are saving by being more energy efficient, which means we can buy a system that is 12 million euros bigger than what we could do if we are not energy efficient. So hopefully you don't tell anybody, but the idea was here not to make sure that we have a small carbon footprint. That was not the main goal in 2012, so at the moment, yeah. The idea was really, can we do more compute by saving on the energy bill? And that's the point. The result is that we are also having a smaller carbon footprint, yeah? But the question is here, why not use the incentive of making more with the same amount of money by being energy efficient? And that's the result of computer science research again. Same thing here. We bought these boxes because we had to. I said, I'm not buying this again. Can we do this hot water cooled? Here's the hot water cooled equivalent. Well, it's not equivalent because only 2 of these rows here is the same as one of the boxes here. So it's half the size. And in fact, one of these racks contains 144 GPUs. So instead of 24, we can put 144 GPUs in one box. And we can also kind of have 1,000 GPUs in 7 racks. I mean, putting up 7 racks, there's sufficient place here if we have the warm water cooling, so to say. Yeah? So it also helps us to run these things. And the measured PoE for this is actually, the latest measurement was 1.02. So 2% extra on the hot water cooling, on the cooling for these systems. So we're really kind of optimizing how this works and how this puts together. We have also brought into operation the latest version. This is SuperMOOC NG phase 2. And that's actually the 1,000 GPUs that I was just mentioning. They are in here. This is not NVIDIA GPUs. This is the latest Ponte Vecchio GPUs we have here. But the idea is really these are using hot water cooling, and it's just a couple of racks in order to put this together. Now, of course, many people say, okay, Leibniz Supercomputing Centre can do that. They have this large room. It's not viable for smaller centers. Well, truth is, I've also brought another example here. This is H Super, which is at the Helmut Schmidt University in Hamburg, and we have nothing to do with Hamburg, I promise. The company here is called Macware, and Macware sold this system to Hamburg, which is a hot water cooled GPU-based supercomputer. And they sold it in a competition where hot water cooling was not requested, but they were able to have a competitive price tag on that one. And they won the competition with the hot water cooling system because also from the electricity, from the total cost of investment, well, here's the actual number. The infrastructure, the investment was you require fewer chillers because you have 7 times better cooling, so you don't read them. There's less operating cost, which I was just explaining. There's less power consumption in running it. And of course, there's slightly higher demand in terms of costs for all the components being water cooled. Yeah? In total, the equation here worked out that the hot water cooled system was cheaper than any of the air cooled systems. And that's an interesting kind of equation that we put in here. And as I said, this is not the end of the equation. Here is what we see, the absorption chilling systems. Absorption cooling works like your fridge at home. Remember your fridge? It produces cold air inside the fridge in order to heat some liquid outside, and kind of on the other side of the membrane produces the cold air. These absorption chilling systems are exactly the same thing. These are research projects. Well, we started with a research project that was only half of these boxes. And this is version 2 of the research project. And this is our production system now, which is kind of taking one side of the building. And we are doing the same thing here. The hot water is produced by the supercomputer. The cold water is produced by these systems. We're using the cold water for the old systems to run them. Now, there's more questions here again. Of course, water. I'll give some other examples. If we just take this new Google data center in Luxembourg, which has a little bit more money than we have in academia, of course, but they are using 12% of Luxembourg's electricity demand for just this computing center. and they require 10 million liters of water per day. We're running closed cycles. Google is not running closed cycles. They get it in, cool it, and then let it out on the other side. Yeah. So there are some questions here. I mean, of course, you can also take other centers. I mean, here's the inside view of the Google data center and so on. So there's more stories. There's really a big research field for what we can do, how we can optimize that. And the reason why we need to do is here, because that's the energy forecast. That's an old slide, but I took it because it was in Nature. And we see how the electricity consumption is going up. I mean, networks, that's clear. But if we just take the data centers, that's the green area below. And we're just increasing here massively. Yeah. So the data centers, the computing IT infrastructure is now responsible for 4% of the carbon generated every year. So there's something in there. And I think we as computer scientists, we have a responsibility. I mean, that comes also with the bytes and all these things that going up and increase. It's something that we have to work in. And coming back to what you said, I mean, we're not only the good guys, we're also kind of contributing to that. Now in Germany, and that's my last bashing slide, the good thing is we are in a free country, so we can always criticize the government. Yeah. So, and I like this slide particularly when I'm in countries which are not free. Yeah. So the proposed Germany, well, the government said, let's do an energy efficiency bill. And that's what they did. So they said there's a section in there called Section 5, Energy Efficiency in Data Centers. And they have a couple of things. Yeah. So they say these centers in the future must have a PUE smaller or equal to 1.3. I remember I said we have 1.03. Yeah? So tenths of what they are requesting here. They also need to have a reused energy of at least 30% or later 40%. Yeah. Again, I said we're running 100% on renewable. And they're allowing a minimum inlet temperature for air cooling for 27 degrees Celsius. Well, the last one point, in my opinion, is nonsense. Yeah. Because what you forget is, even if you allow the air temperature to increase, you allow the fan to run faster. And the fan electricity consumption goes up with the power of 3. So this, I'm not sure, maybe no physicist has given them some idea on how this works here. Yeah? But anyway, so there is some problem here. I was asked whether I like this bill, and I said, well, I'm happy that the government is thinking about this, but this is way too little ambitious. Yeah? If we want to do something, we should also think about incentives of making it better and putting it together. So I hope I was able to provide some insights on more compute with less energy. I mean, energy efficiency is essential for sustainability. It's only one component, admitted. I only barely touched the water issue here. We need, I think, a more holistic approach, and that means more than gigaflops per watt. So there's many more areas in computer science that can contribute here and provide something. And of course, what people always forget is not forcing you to have a smaller carbon footprint. It's a financial question. That's where you come in. So if we talk about AI, I think we shouldn't talk so much about these large language models. I think we should talk about more smart language models. Yeah? Something where we put more brainware in and make sure that we avoid some of the carbon production that we see now with these energy models. Thank you very much.
Hybrid presentation. So I would say that we start with questions from the audience in person, and then we look online if there are also questions from outside. So if you have questions, just go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for a very nice presentation. You basically, as an operator of an HPC center, of course, you talked about compute power. What is it now with the increasing demand for data? How do they reflect on energy consumption?
Well, it's the same thing. The power increase is a little bit less steep than for the computation. Yeah? For computation these days, we really need more electricity in order to get more power. For the storage, you still have an increase, but it's not that kind of. There's the same thing. So in essence, if that's the question, we also need to take care of this one. And one example is the NSA data center in Utah, which has also investments in the billion area, and their storage capabilities go up to yottabyte, if I remember correctly. And there's lots of carbon produced just to store secret data that was captured somewhere.
Mm. And what's your take on hot storage versus cold storage tapes?
Well, for us, the tapes are still the goal for the long-term storage because the density is higher. And as you said, the tapes don't consume anything once it's stored on the tape. Yeah? While the hard disks still have rotating parts. Yeah? There's an aspect on that where we still have to improve. It was not our focus so far.
Thank you. I would have one question that goes into another dimension of optimization, which would be the optimization of the code that is actually running. Do you do any governance in that respect? Do you make requirements, or is there a review process? Do you have some guidelines? It would be very interesting to learn.
No, that's a very good question. I like that. The point here is, at the moment, we're still giving away allocations on the system in core hours. And I'm trying now since 5 years to make sure, let's go away from the core hours to energy units, something, yeah? But it's a very hard discussion, yeah? Because again, what I believe is you need an incentive to do that, yeah? And if your code is more energy efficient than the other one and you get more compute out of that, that could be one of these incentives. But at the moment, we don't see enough traction in that area. Yeah. So there's lots of potential in there. And I think the large language models is one of the examples. I mean, Hochreiter and Linz and Björn Ommer in Munich, they've also said it's not about the quantity of the data that you have, it's the quality that you produce with your model. And smaller models, which are much more efficient, can produce better quality even. Yeah. But that's the research again that's going on. Thank you. It was a very important point.
I would also like to thank you for the answer, because it leads to my second question that I had actually. When you showed us in the beginning the model of how a star is born, you said it's like 10,000 pixels in every dimension, which is a round number, but is it really necessary? If it would be reduced to 5,000 every dimension, we would go down to 1/8 of the processing capacity. So the question is, do you somehow lead a discussion process on the, as we call them, hyperparameters in such computations, or is that left to the experimenter?
Well, the point here is that these models exhibit certain characteristics only at certain scales.
Okay. The question is, what is the right scale?
That's exactly a good point, but I couldn't answer that. We would need to ask the astrophysicist. Yeah, I know only that Volker Springel, who's running the big Millennium simulations, he is more or less always eager to get the next system because he believes to see more things when he does the simulation there. I'm not sure if we need really every simulation. Yeah, but here comes AI. And that's one of the things. I mean, large language models have their domain, yeah. But what we see also very much coming up is where AI kind of steers the HPC simulation exactly in the domain that you're saying. Does it really make sense to run another simulation, or does the AI already say no? There will be no convergence or something, yeah. So and Volker Springel, I think we have an article in our latest newsletter on that one where he explains how AI helps us to be also better in that respect. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the very interesting talk, Dieter. My question is, what I have seen, what you have explained today, you treat the workload as a black box. So do you look into the type of the workload in terms of cooling efficiency? Do you try to distinguish what is running, where, or do you treat it as a black box?
Now, the one example I've given you is the dynamic clock frequency scaling. That actually is, we start the first job with an average frequency of 70%. Yeah. And then we run the job and we see how long the waiting time for how memory intensive the talk is. Is it more compute intensive or memory intensive? If it's more memory intensive, then we can downscale the job more or less in terms of frequency. If it's less memory, it's more compute intensive, we have to upscale it. Yeah. But that's more or less an outside view on what the application is doing. Yeah. It's still not something where we go inside and is there a possibility? We hope that most of these codes on the large scale system are really already optimized in order to run there. Yeah? But what we can do is more or less getting a view on what the memory access pattern is, more or less. Requires again some instrumentation and lots of CS research on how to do that. And that was a CS PhD thesis that did this dynamic clock frequency scaling.
Thank you.
You talked about these really large simulations. So I wonder, I mean, is it one simulation at a time you're running, or also, I mean, are you trying to kind of combine simulations that have different characteristics and so kind of better use your system by finding the right combination of things that you do?
That's also a good question. So that comes back to the utilization of the system. Yeah? Usually a cloud provider has a utilization of 95%, and if it's less, then the cloud provider is going bankrupt soon or something. Yeah? In our case, the average utilization is about 85%. The reason for that one is we are exactly there to run these large codes. So if a large code runs, we have to empty the system so that the large code can use all the cores in there. So there is a kind of number of jobs going down and then number of jobs going up again. Yeah. But in the meantime, we're trying to fill up the holes with some things. Yeah. And there are some jobs which are very good for that one. For instance, the one done at CERN, the high energy physics. If there is some idle processes, we can always just take the next package from high energy physics, let it run, and then kind of drop it if we need it again. Yeah. So there is something going on in that direction. But again, I think there's more potential in there on how to combine this. I'm critical to what the Commission wants to do. They also want this, the European Commission wants this exascale system that run only exascale codes. Yeah. I would not do that. I would say we have a mixture of different code characteristics which need to be submitted by the system, but we also need to have the possibility of using the system all at once for the big jobs. And Ralph Ludwig's application, for instance, the climate job, there was 7,500 small simulation jobs. Yeah, he still couldn't only do this on the system because he was producing 450 terabyte of data. But the means was here not to use all the cores at the same time for one simulation, but to use many small portions on the same amount of data.
The first one, direct water cooling is used in HPC data centers like yours and in the Vienna Scientific Cluster. Commercial data centers for web hosting, for example, there is not so much water cooling. How can regular data centers be transitioned to direct water cooling? What has to change? Do water-cooled servers have to become standard?
Well, I think we see an increase in water-cooled system in a sense, because you see what I've showed with the Megware example, that there is an incentive in the financial aspect. The problem, I think, is when you change an existing data center, you would have to rebuild many of these things. Yeah. But I think today, if you do a new data center, why not go water in the first place? That's my point. So I think it will take some time to change that. Yeah. But it is something where we can come up to. And then the other point is, of course, water cooling with free cooling only makes sense in certain regions on the planet. Yeah. But in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to put data centers in very hot regions anyway. Yeah. So there's a political component to that. Yeah. But I think we see an increase in that one. And I mean, I mentioned VSC and that's the same boxes more or less. So this is now a standard product We might have been the first one where it was developed, but now you can more or less call up the vendor and ask them to provide you with this technology.
Okay, thank you. I will come to the second question. Do you use or support ASICs or FPGAs for specialized calculations?
Yeah, that's one of the projects we had on future technologies, and I've just, well, he needs to do the final defense of his PhD, but that's exactly the idea here, to use these FPGAs for accelerators on some of the codes, again, to help you. It's the same example as with quantum. You would want to use quantum systems as accelerators for HPC system when the quantum system is superior. And there's also ways where the FPGA system is superior. The Paderborn Computing Center is very much advanced on this aspect and shows some of these points. Yeah.
And here, perhaps the final or next question. Not a great question is which question to read.
So there are some questions. It gets good news.
You were talking about LZ is running on 100% renewable energy. What exactly does that mean in more detail?
That's an easy question. We actually, what, I think we are the only academic center in Germany that is able to buy and sell electricity. We could actually theoretically do it in 15 minutes interval. So if I see a big job coming, I could buy more electricity. If I see we're going down in maintenance, we could sell some of the electricity. Now, the point here is the contracts we do require that the electricity provider gives us 100% guarantees that this is 100% renewable energy. So there needs to be certificates. If I would have a doubt, I could sue them in a sense. Yeah. But of course, I don't know if this electrical element really comes from a wind turbine or something. Yeah? So there's a guarantee that is kind of legally based.
I'll take the last question here. If I understood correctly, Kranzlmüller is still in the procurement phase. Do you expect to see offers based on the ARM hardware instead of the x86? As far as I'm aware, RISC-based systems are slowly gaining traction in the HPC domain.
Yeah, the answer is yes. And if you take a look at Jülich's latest system, that is a combination of GPUs and ARM-based processors.
Okay, is your job scheduler aware of the current electricity price? Do you have variable electricity prices?
Well, in a sense, we don't need that because we are paid for the electricity anyway. Yeah? So we need to make sure that at the end of the year, there's a zero below the line. Yeah? And the good thing is with this dynamic clock frequency, we can also balance it that the zero comes out in the end. Yeah. So we are more or less, if we see December 15 coming around and we see, oh, we are using too much energy, we just run the system slower to get to the finish line. But that's an advantage that you have in there. Yeah. So I'm not so much concerned. The problem with being your own electricity kind of consumer and buying it yourself is that when the war in Ukraine started, our kind of prediction was, let's buy all the electricity until the end of 24. And the price we got is, well, it was worse than before, but it was better than us getting some support from the federal government. So we did not have enough increase to get the support for our electricity costs, yeah, which means that our approach works, but the good guys don't get the benefits here. That's a problem.
I haven't seen any photovoltaic
Ah,
panels on your picture.
well,
Or
that's
perhaps I missed it.
very, very good question. I'll show you the picture again. Actually, the idea was we went to government and said, you know, we want to put photovoltaics on all 5 of the buildings. And the government said, how much money do you need? And we said, well, we did the calculation. We found out this is the number X. I can't remember what it is. Yeah. And then we started this project. The problem is that all these regulations, certificates, and all this stuff have taken up so much of the money, of the budget we had, that only one of the roofs is left. So we can only fit, we are fitting photovoltaics on the first building up there. And that's the only thing left with the, it's ridiculous on what regulations kind of force you to do, huh? Because it really, all the other roofs will not have photovoltaics because we have to pay certificates for the electricity we're producing ourselves. And the estimate for the electricity we can do with photovoltaics was we can produce enough electricity for everything in the computing center apart from the compute part. So everything else. Still, I think it's a good thing to do. We're trying some of these projects because we also want to show that this is the direction we have to go.
I think it was a very good final statement. Dieter Kranzlmüller, thank you very much for your presentation within our lecture series. Thank you for being here, and thank you to the audience for being here.
Thank you very much.